Hello, welcome to the meeting of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing in Brookline. This is our meeting for Friday, February 26th. I'm Raul Fernandez, Select Board Member and Chair of the Task Force, joined here, as always, by our Task Force members and able staff. We are having this meeting on the eve, essentially, of our presentation to the Select Board, which will take place in just a few days. And so our primary purpose today is to adopt the final report of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing in Brookline. We've come a long way. We've been at this for 6 months now. We've held 7 public hearings. We've met with countless residents, experts, members of the police department, and we've done our own research, either as individuals or established to lead this work through the task force. So we're very excited about the report that we have here. Our goal today is to discuss any final bits that we need to relative to this report, and ultimately to adopt the report so that we can move forward with the presentation to the Select Board on March 2nd. So with that said, before we get any further, I wanted to know if there are any updates or anything that members of the task force would want to say at the onset of the meeting. Hearing none, let's get right into it. We got a couple things to do related to meeting minutes. One is to approve the meeting minutes from Friday, February 19th, but then also approving any remaining subcommittee minutes. I'm sure Devin will walk us through that portion. So first, on the minutes of Friday, February 19th, and those are in your packet, any updates or questions about those minutes? Great. All right, let's get right into approving them then. Question of approving the minutes, meeting minutes from Friday, February 19th, 2021. I'll go across. First person I see is Mike Salmon.
Yes.
Bonnie Bastian?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Malcolm?
Yes.
Almas?
Yes.
Alexander?
Yes.
Chi-Chi?
Yes.
Eitan?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, great. Devin, what do we have next on the subcommittee minutes?
Sure. So I put this catch-all language on the agenda in case any subcommittees had outstanding minutes that they wanted to get out of the way in this meeting. I know, for example, we talked about last week the vulnerable people and people in crisis subcommittee. So if there are subcommittees that want to take advantage of this time, this isn't your last opportunity to do so. So if you don't feel prepared, that's fine. But I can walk us through a vote of the respective subcommittees if you just want to send in the chat if you're ready to do that. For example, if the vulnerable people and people in crisis subcommittee are ready, I will read your roll call for the meeting minutes. If you can just confirm the date of that meeting.
It's February 18th.
All right, question of approving the meeting minutes for the vulnerable people and people in crisis subcommittee meeting from February 18th. Alexander Weinstein?
Yes.
Ann Weaver?
Yes.
Alma Stosa?
Yes.
All right, those pass unanimously. And the school resource officer subcommittee, it looks like you want to take care of February 16th. Does everyone feel ready to do that?
Yes.
All right, question of approving the meeting minutes from the school resource officer subcommittee meeting on February 16th. I will start with Malcolm Cawthorn.
Yes.
Alexander Weinstein.
Yes.
Kristen Singleton.
Yes.
Kimberly Richardson.
Yes.
All right, and those pass unanimously or approved. Anybody else? It looks like the chat is all set. So thank you, folks. And I believe you've sent both sets of those to me already. So then I will go ahead and post them. Thanks all.
Great, thanks, Devin. This is also important to note while our subcommittee work for the time has wrapped up. This is not our final meeting. we do have, we've talked about the schedule before the select board, a presentation on March 2nd, a public hearing on March 16th, and a select board vote on the 30th. I think that in some cases, we're going to want to meet either before or after those dates to either prepare for or to discuss what happened at those meetings and to see if there's anything that we need to do in response. So just, what I want everybody to do is just to hold these Friday times. I think it's certain, and I know it's certain that we're going to meet this coming Friday to review the meeting, the presentation in front of the select board this Tuesday. I'm not so sure about March 12th yet. I feel certain we're going to meet on March 19th to discuss the public hearing that would take place in front of the select board on March 16th. Not so sure about March 26th yet, and April 2nd is the Friday that will immediately follow what's expected to be a vote of the select board, and I think we're going to want to meet then to sort of discuss what happened there, and then to tie up any loose ends and to start to wrap up. I know some folks have talked about continuing on in this work. We're going to have to sort of check in throughout March with the select board to see where the board feels more work needs to be done, and whether or not members of this body want to continue on doing this work or go on to do other things. So we'll talk about that as the month goes on. Okay. The next agenda item, however, is the task force final report. It's a question of approving the final report of the task force to reimagine policing in Brookline. I wanted to first make sure everybody's, the final report is in your packet, and for any members of the public, they should have access to it as well. First of all, thank you all for your tremendous work in editing and submitting comments, and we did some work over the last week to organize this into something, really taking into account the feedback from last Friday. Organize this into something where someone can pick up the report, read the executive summary, and have a very strong sense of what it is that we're recommending and why we're recommending it. At the same time, they have the ability to dig in and really, if there's a great interest in a particular area, like the school resource officer or vulnerable people and people in crisis, to really dig in and understand more about the work of the individual subcommittees there. So I'm pretty proud of the way that everything turned out. We decided to include all of the appendices at the end. We thought that was the way to make it the most readable possible version. But all of those through the table of contents are linked down to the appendix. So if you see something, you'll be able to link very easily to it on the PDF version once you download the PDF version. So anyway, there were we just caught one I think there was an editing, some sort of one word that needs to get fixed this morning. So that's getting fixed. That was in one of our findings that's getting fixed. And then the other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to, which is something more substantive, and I want to make sure that when we vote, we're voting with this in mind as well, is when we look at the Brookline Forward piece. So if you were to go, for instance, to the table of contents and then see Brookline Forward on page 80, there is one addition in there from the last week under establishing new offices, and it is where it says community-based crisis response. So this is what we've talked about through the Vulnerable People and People in Crisis Subcommittee about ultimately sort of working with Cahoots and a consultancy to develop a Cahoots-like model for Brookline. And I don't know that we had, up until this point, been specific about, well, where's that thing going to live? And so it's been recommended that it lives there. And so, and I know you folks that was recommending that. Do you want to just talk about that and why you think that's important to put it as part of the Brookline Forward model?
I'll try to give you the short version as opposed to my long presentation version. But the short version is basically because I see the work being done by that crisis intervention team as coming out of a social service, social justice community model, which seems to be a better fit for the kind of work that would be done by this new team than under a health and human service department, which I think in my experience tends to be more medical model, with a medical model perspective, where people, in a crisis, what's seen as a good end result is bringing them to the ED to get checked out to see if they need to be hospitalized or not, or if their medications are off, or something that's pathologizing about the person instead of why is the person experiencing this in this world? How can we better support this person so that they're not going into crisis to begin with, in terms of root causes of people's distress, which fits better within the model that we're proposing here. So it's a matter of kind of holistic perspective of how a person is treated, both when they're in crisis and also what's causing them to be in crisis to begin with, that fits better, in my opinion, in the Brookline Forward department kind of philosophy than in a more medical model type of context. And I can give you the 45-minute speech too, but that's, I hope that makes sense. I can answer questions if.
Any questions for Ann on this? Other comments? I think this makes sense. It's the entire idea around Brookline Forward is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and including this particular sort of crisis response work as part of the larger work of this department. I think they're going to be much better informed through the other folks that are in this department doing work with youth and families and immigrants and refugees and others about the lay of the land and how best to support people when the time comes. So
there's a saying in the trauma informed practice world. It's not if somebody's in crisis, somebody's presenting for needing therapy or whatever, it's not it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. That's the question you start with. It's not like, what's wrong with you, why are you here today? It's what's happened to you, how can we support you in that? And so that's basically how I'm thinking about this work.
Right. I'll also add that that I met with Mel and Melissa yesterday, and I know Ann's been helpful in this too, but figuring out exactly some kind of estimate for the department. We're going to have that next week. I wish I had it for you today, but we've got there's some work to do on that. Mel, anything you want to say about that?
I'm learning a little bit more about it. That was helpful conversation that Ann had. So, we're trying to figure out the model so at least we can put some numbers associated with it. So no, that's fine. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. We understand also that this is a big change that's gonna happen over time, not immediately, although many of us understand that the needs there's an urgency to meet the needs that are out there right now and to make the kinds of changes we're recommending. But with that said, I think it's important that we put forward exactly where we think we should be, and that we be clear about what's necessary to get there. So that's a conversation we'll be having with the select board and other bodies for sure. Any other questions about this? So let me open the floor and just see if there's anything else on the final report, that Gigi shared something important. Anybody looking at the final report, we've renumbered the appendices at the end, but we haven't, or relettered the appendices at the end, but we haven't relettered them within the subcommittee reports. So we're going to go back and do that. So that'll get done. Any other things that you saw in the reports that we need to address? Okay. Any concerns at this point with any aspect of the report? Anything that gives you pause? Anything in that realm that you say, well, I love, I love this report, but I don't know, I just don't know about this. And I know this is at the late stage, and we've had, I can't tell you how many conversations about this at this point. But I wanted to make sure that when we take this vote, that everyone, feels good about having their name on this report. So this is not the time, I think, for line editing or anything like that, unless there's something that you find particularly objectionable. That's potentially something that we could do. But just wanted to get a sense of where you are, and anyone that has any sort of like reticence or issues with any part, and to be able to leave some space for that conversation. Eitan.
Yeah, I just say that the one part that I think reticence is the right word. Not that is about the walk and talk, and how to the extent that I understand the other committee, the reform committees come to different conclusions, and it's been hard to survey people. And I think that to me our recommendation about the school resource officer is much clearer in my mind than the exact reasons why the recommendation for the walk and talk unit is what it is. So, I mean, I don't know if it's worth getting into it, but I think that's the one part that I would love like additional, feedback on. Not feedback, like, or just, a more fleshed out explanation. Or just understanding of why people came to different conclusions.
Connecting of the dots, you mean? Is that like,
yeah.
Bonnie, do you want to?
So I feel unprepared to gather my thoughts. So our whole set of recommendations is based off of the idea that this is a public safety strategy. And when we hear from any part of a community that is receiving this public safety strategy that feels unsafe and uncomfortable because of the strategy itself, then that is not a public safety strategy. And when we hear responses from Black and Brown voices, responses that are coming specifically from them and not from white voices, we need to pay attention to those voices, because Brookline has an enormous majority of white people and a very small minority of people of color. So when things come from people that are Black or Brown, they're always going to be in the minority. So when you hear something, they need to be lifted up out of that majority wins measurement. And what we are hearing is that there is an enormous fear, a reticence to speak out, and that is very, very telling about the problematic nature of the walk and talk program. Therefore, it's not a good public safety strategy. Is there a specific element that the difference between our perspective and the perspective of the reform committee is that the reform committee hears all the people that say they like it. Those are the voices that are very easy to hear. Their survey and their conversations did not include the negative voices. They didn't discuss that element at all. In fact, it was ignored because they heard, we had plenty of people in attendance here that could have passed on that information to them. So they did not take that information into account, and we are weighing that information very heavily here because it matters. Because when we ignore Black and brown voices, we uphold racist systems.
Thank you.
Can I say something? Oh, go ahead.
No. And go ahead, Kimberly.
So you said you want to, I guess, understand like why some people like it and why some don't. Is I'm trying to, if that's what I'm hearing you say, right? I just want to be sure before I get into that. Okay, so
yeah, I guess, yeah, I guess, yeah, it seems to be like there's a little bit more, because I think of the difficulty in surveying people or getting like the feedback that we think is the right feedback. I feel like I just feel like I have less clarity about this part of the recommendation.
okay, so I can't speak for everyone, but I'll try to make it clear from my perspective and how I see things. So for those people who like it, right? Those people, so you have people, poor people living in public housing who don't have access to a lot of things, right? So then when the police come and offer them good things like a ride to graduation or food or things like that, of course they like those things, right? Because they need those things, right? But then you have poor people who don't want to be policed by police, right? Like myself, who moved to Brookline, and the minute I moved here, all I saw was police, always around, always around. And I'm like, why is the police always around here? And then I begin to understand, and I'm going to use this word, because we live in public, I'm not going to call it public housing. This is, people call it the project. That's what they call it. No, that's we paint a better picture when we say BHA or public housing. It's the projects, and people, the police people in the projects because they want to keep them in their place. So there are people who like it because it benefits them because they need things. They don't have resources. So yeah, but if we didn't get to hear from people like myself who don't mind standing up can advocate for myself. I'm not worried about, housing or the police, like housing kicking me out or the police following me or doing things like that, because I can advocate for myself. I know how to go and fight if that happens, but you have people who can't do that, who are afraid to do that. And so those are the voices that we didn't hear from. But if we heard from 3 people, 3, 6, 5 that don't like it, that means it's not working. And for those 2 people that like it, okay, yeah, we'll figure something else that make it works, that'll help them get those resources, like a ride to graduation, right? Brookline Police can give them a gift card to Uber to get a ride. And I'm just being funny right there. I apologize, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks, Kimberly. I'll sort of taking a step back on this. I've been thinking about this as I was listening to Eitan, Bonnie, and Kimberly, and I was thinking about a couple things. One is if a proposal came my way to use, we had 3 FTEs, three positions, and someone said, hey, I think we should use them to have 3 police officers patrolling and engaging and building relationships within public housing. I would say no. I would say, I think if we've got 3 FTEs, I think I can find a better way to use those FTEs than that. Absolutely. To meet the needs of the people that would be patrolled by this. I think also second, as part of our larger strategy, I think what we're doing is really signaling here a different orientation for not just a social service department or not just the police department, but for our whole community with respect to how we engage with folks in our community, especially those that need it most, how we're working to solve those problems, again, rather than just addressing the apparent symptoms of those problems. And so that's for me, I think that's where I get there. I think if we end up having individual conversations about, and I don't mean here necessarily, but going forward, let's say with the board about, it's interesting because I think some folks want to put the onus on, has the task force proved that this is a bad unit? Is I think the wrong orientation to this question. First of all, it's on the unit itself to prove that they're a good one. And I don't know that that's been the case, but I don't think it's necessary to prove good or bad in order to say, I think there's a better way to use those 3 FTEs. I think there's a better way to use that part of our budget in a way that more deeply, meaningfully, and durably addresses the issues that our residents are facing. I think that's the larger conversation that we need to be having, I think, with the select board and the community, not about individual pieces there. Let me get Mike in here, and I know, Kim, I see your hand up too.
I think that if you just step back, the concept of providing social services through the police department is really what we're questioning here, or not questioning. We're saying that's not what we should be doing. And the whole thrust of the report is to provide services that currently are being provided through the police department because the services are needed and nobody else has been doing them. But to provide them through an agency that is not the police, doesn't carry with it the aura of law enforcement. That carries over to the school resource offices. It's the response to mental health emergencies. And it's the same thing with the walk and talk officers. It's a matter of we've shoehorned the police, or the police will have been shoehorned into doing things that they really weren't designed to do. And with the best will in the world, it's very difficult for them to shed the image that they are the police.
Thanks, Mike. Kimberly?
I just want to say this really quickly, and I know we said it before. And every person on this task force, right? Everyone in this meeting, everyone who lives in Brookline, right? Everyone has a police officer that is assigned to their precinct, right? We don't need a unit assigned to BHA. Make it this precinct. They can just be a part of this precinct like every other policing. We don't need that. Why? Why is it that BHA needs a dedicated unit for housing? It doesn't make sense. And so no one else has that, Eitan, and that's why it doesn't make sense.
Let me get Eitan to respond, then Chi-Chi. Yeah.
I just want to say, I totally agree. I mean, I'm fully behind this. What I would say is that I think rereading the report, a lot more kind of uncertainty comes through about, it was hard to talk to people, it's hard to get this feedback. And I would just say that, I mean, everything that was just been said in the last 5 minutes is extremely compelling. And I would just advocate, I mean, I don't want to put Kimberly on the spot, but I think Kimberly's voice really needs to come through when we present this information, because I think that, and this is really not meant as a criticism at all, but I think in the report, what I think is a really compelling and clear case doesn't come through quite as clearly as it just did in the last 5 minutes to me.
Thanks, Eitan. Chi-Chi.
So, funny, the thing I was going to do is ask Eitan a question and his feedback on their walk and talk survey, because I mean, the reform committee recommendation depends a lot on its survey of BHA residents about the walk and talk unit. And I pulled up what I could on it, which is a draft copy. And what I'm noticing on the demographics is it's a bit skewed. And the survey that Tufts did wasn't representative, but it's a bit skewed in an interesting way. There's an overrepresentation of Asians, and I happen to know those surveys were done in Chinese. So this is what made me think, wow, 10 surveys and an overrepresentation. And then there's an overrepresentation of older folks. And then we remember the experience of what happened when the walk and talk officers solicited residents to come to that subcommittee meeting. And I'm thinking, well, we obviously made efforts to get people to respond to the Tufts survey, but in a sort of a broad general way. I mean, these walk and talk officers are in BHA housing all the time and can certainly say, to folks who they know are supportive, hey, make sure you fill out that survey. So I don't know if given the numbers, you would still consider it a scientific survey and the survey methodology. That was just a thought that came to me because, it's very rare to see Asians overrepresented in a survey. And, we know that there's already 50% of the BHA housing is seniors, and now you have an overrepresentation. Obviously, seniors would have a different perspective. And by the way, Rahul has heard me say this multiple times. I live right next door to the Colonel Floyd developments. And so my back window, I see what's going on. I never see the walk and talk unit at Colonel Floyd because it's a senior development. Anyway.
I want to make sure that we're answering your question, Eitan, because it's easy for me to get emotionally triggered because I did this work. So I want to make sure that I'm not doing that and that I'm actually addressing what you're asking. Are you saying that in the report, we're not defending this well enough?
Look, I think here's what I would say. The combination of the report, the kind of the conflict or debate over the incident with the walk and talk officer, the other findings that, the walk and talk survey that the other reform did, I feel like this part of our project is a little bit more clouded than other ones, to no fault of yours, of the subcommittee at all. I just think that my sense is that if someone is watching, the committees, this is an area where it seems like there's some greater uncertainty. Maybe I'm wrong about that, about what the findings are, given the difficulty to solicit feedback from people who don't want to offer feedback. And so the goal of my question was really just to make sure we're presenting a really strong case. I think that strong case came out in this conversation. Could the report be written differently? I don't know. I don't want to. There's not. There's not a time to give edits. I would just say that. I don't know. Maybe I'm alone in just perceiving this kind of this more like kind of uncertain situation here, than the other things. But I don't feel like at all reticent about voting for this or supporting what the committee's saying, and everything that was just said seems totally right to me. But I think that what gave me pause is the focus on the report of, the great uncertainty, the great difficulty just to soliciting kind of like what is the feedback we want? What is our standard of getting that feedback? If one person is upset, is that enough? If a lot of people are upset, how would you know? It just seems like a different standard, and I think it's fine that it's a different standard, but I just think that I don't know. I'm rambling. I just felt like I wanted more clarity. That's all.
It is absolutely a different standard, and the standard is we are choosing to believe what people say, and we are choosing to believe the organizations when we say we're hearing that people don't want to come to us because they fear losing their tenancy, because they don't want to talk. Why would they be afraid to speak praise about the police? We are hearing that tenants don't want to do this. They don't want to speak with us because they are afraid of losing their tenancy, because they're afraid of retribution. And organizations that work directly with those people are saying, yes, that's correct. That's not one person, that's not two, that's someone else's experience with many people saying what you're reflecting to me is accurate, in addition to the people that we have spoken with. So
Okay.
yeah, we are we are making the choice to believe people and to take from that information what you've seen here. It's not, I know you're a data analyst, so that's not really going to apply in this way. And so it makes a lot of sense that you're asking these questions as who you are. But we have to take a different tack here because that's just not going to work here.
Let me hear Malcolm out, and then I've got some thoughts too. Malcolm.
Yeah. So just to be transparent, I have not read the reform report, any stages of it. between this work and other work and the job that pays my bills, it's been hard to keep up with what they're doing, frankly. And I don't mean that in any sort of negative way. Just my reality. I think what I'm hearing though in this conversation that I think is important for us all to recognize is that this is really the one area where we're directly giving recommendations that the reform is also giving direct recommendations. Like the other stuff has overlap, but it's not, it's the only subcommittees that are exact. And so that creates a different tension, that creates a different competition. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and put that out in the air, because what I read was fine for me, but I also haven't read it in comparison or in contrast to the reform. And so I don't have a balance of argument. I am certainly in favor of the argument that was put forth in our report and from our committee. But I think what I'm just recognizing in this moment is that heightened tension and competition for the select board's favor, right? Like ultimately they're going to look at both of these and in the best world, lean one way or the other. In the worst world, not make any changes or reforms or reimagine, right? And so, yeah, I just want to put that out there that I'm recognizing that heightened tension in this moment, and that it's real. Yeah, and I just think, it is the one area that's gonna, bang heads, where the select board is gonna look at both of those reports to make either a decision where those merge, where they lean more one direction than the other, or they say, if we have these diverging things, let it stand, whatever the select board comes to. And so I think, yeah, I just think in this moment, I'm really realizing that. And I wish I had realized that earlier to be more helpful.
Yeah, I wanted to add here, well, a couple things. One is I think that it was, and having watched also the subcommittee meeting where the walk and talk officers were interviewed, I sensed the frustration of the interviewers, because one of the things we were trying to understand is what their job is. And I don't know if anybody else watched that. It was very difficult to ascertain what their job actually is. And a lot of the responses were, well, every day is different and it depends. And for me, the inability to have any observable metrics for their job, which we haven't dug this deep into it, but I'd love to see performance evaluations and exactly what it is that that folks were evaluated on, because it's not altogether clear what the metrics for their role even is. And many of us, work in capacities where we're evaluated, and it's maybe a little bit more clear exactly in what ways we're being evaluated. I think what we're talking about is a program where it's difficult for anybody to wrap their head around. I mean, the Reform Committee survey was we're told, sent to every residence in public housing. They received 70 responses. Half of the people who have responded said they'd never heard of the program or weren't aware of the program. I'm not quite sure why they responded. I guess they had some time on their hands, but they said they weren't aware of the program, and then for some reason completed the survey anyway, even though it was about the program. So that's interesting to me. So you get about 35 people who faithfully responded to this survey, anyway, looking at the total number, the majority, the vast majority were white and were seniors, and even in the population of folks from communities of color, the vast majority were also older, seniors or older. And so it's been very difficult to get, even from a group, by the way. Remember this committee of the Reform Committee was the chair of that subcommittee is the department head in the police department who literally oversees those officers. That was the chair of that subcommittee. So you can imagine that if there was any orientation, it'd be try to get some favorable response about the unit. and that's not very clear. I think they encountered some of the very same challenges that we encountered in our work, which is getting feedback on this unit. It seems the answer here is most people don't even know it exists, and that's people who live in public housing. Most people don't even know it exists, right? And so that's just one. And again, I think talking specifically about the unit gets us not very much anywhere, because I think it's one of those Rorschach tests. You look at it and you see what you want to see. The exception here, and by the way, I say that for most of us here, the exception here is those people who actually live in public housing. And because it's easier for those of us who don't live in public housing, who aren't personally impacted by having a unit like this, good, bad, or indifferent, to have opinions about whether or not it should be. But I think having her, I mean, first of all, this is one of the things that I think, I really want to encourage, like, my fellow select board members, because we'll say things like, we haven't heard from people of color. And I'm like, well, the majority of people on this task force are people of color, first of all. We haven't heard from anybody in public housing. We have a member of our task force who lives every day in public housing, and that's not the only person we've heard from, but we've been deeply informed by that by that contribution there. And so it's a reminder that this is not a group of 11 people who are apart from the community or communities that they're sort of investigating, but live in the community and are impacted by policing as much as anybody else here. So I just want to say that. The other thing is what we are recommending in the end is something that people can vote for, not against. Not against the walk and talk unit or police or school resource officers specifically, but to vote for something. But in order to vote for that thing, there are trade-offs that need to happen. And we've identified what we think those trade-offs should be. Is it possible to reform a walk and talk unit so that it does all the good things and none of the bad ones? Maybe. I don't know. I wouldn't risk it personally. Is it possible to do that with school resource officers? Maybe. I don't know. I wouldn't risk it personally. I just think having that conversation is a loser. I think, and I don't mean for us as a task force, I mean for us as a community. I think the larger conversation we need to have is where we want to go in the future and what we need to do to get there. We've got a vision that we've laid out in this task force report. And it doesn't include walk and talk officers or school resource officers. It just doesn't, right? And I don't think that's a condemnation of any individual officer or the department or anything like that. It's a trade-off that I think needs to be made. Alexander?
Yeah, I wanted to just say, I agree with Eitan's comment about, I would love to see some of the powerful language that I've just heard reflected a little more strongly in the report. So particularly from Kimberly and from Bonnie about some of the reasoning behind the conclusions that you came to. I thought it was really clear and concise and really powerful, and also that Raul articulated as well. And I think it's there, but I think some of that reasoning could come forward a little more powerfully in the language.
I think one of the ways to address this is in the presentation itself, and to make sure that comes across in the presentation. Yeah,
for sure. It doesn't have to be in the writing.
Right.
I'm gonna have to roll the tape back because I don't even know what I said. But
yeah, it's a good idea, actually. Yeah.
I feel like, yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Mike?
I have a question for you. I wonder if we could shift the conversation about this just a second. How are we presenting this when we go to the select board? And we have a very long report. We're obviously not going to read the report. We're going to have some bites, almost sound bites on this, because the way that we present it will have a significant impact on how it's received. It's not like it's a trite comment, stupid comment, but nonetheless, we really have to think about how we are going to present it to, we have to think about the image that at least some people in the community have about the reimagining process and the committee. And we have to think about the recommendations that we're making and present them in a way that is going to speak to the get past whatever preconceived notions people may have about the report and the committee. And that has a direct bearing really on this, because this is one of the action items that we're saying. We're going to change this program. How are we going to present these things at the select board?
Great question. First off, I talked to the chair of the Reform Committee yesterday. We're both going to be presenting on the evening of March 2nd. So, and we, meaning the Reform Committee and the task force. So the Reform Committee is going to we'll present back to back, and then we'll be having a discussion. It's going to be a lot. I mean, this is a ton of information for the board to digest. I know there's at least a couple of board members that have been very dialed in to the work that we've been doing, both groups, and a couple that haven't. And so there's going to be a lot of perhaps new information for board members when we're presenting. So we're trying to balance making these presentations as direct and pithy as possible, while also providing as much context as possible. And that's going to be a difficult thing to do. When we presented on the 17th in our final public hearing, that our presentation was about an hour. I attended the public hearing that the Reform Committee just held this week, and their presentation was about an hour. And so we've got to, I'd love to try to get that down to about 45 minutes. I'm also recognizing that I'm part of getting that down. There are certain things that the board already knows. And so keeping in mind our audience, I had a lot of information in the early stages about the creation of the task force. I've got to take a look at that, because what I'm also mindful is that there's a large audience out there that are tuning in for the first time on this. And so March 2nd is going to be our last presentation before the public hearing takes place on the 16th and before the vote takes place of the select board on the 30th. But more importantly, the public hearing, meaning that the public hearing on the 16th is going to be based on our report and whatever people saw at the select board meeting on March 2nd, and if they wanted to go back and watch other videos of our previous meetings, but primarily what they saw at the select board on March 2nd. So I'm trying to balance not losing the interest of the board by having had one presentation and then another presentation. We're talking, potentially 2 hours of presentations before they even get a chance to ask questions. Not losing the interest of the board, but at the same time making sure that we provide as much context as possible to really understand how we reached the conclusions we did. So I don't have a good answer for you right now, Mike, but I'm gonna be working on it. And I may have some recommendations for the presenters that'll be presenting along with me on Tuesday about, seeing how we can sort of get to it as quickly as possible. I don't know. Think about whether or not that meets the needs of your question. I'm not quite sure, but
I'm really concerned about 2 45-minute reports in front of the select board, or 2 1-hour reports. I think that the ability to actually communicate by the time you get to the end is
me too. I'll talk with the chair and see, I don't know what can be done about it, frankly, but
I'm trying to think about it myself. I've done, okay. All right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Mike. Alexander? You're muted.
Sorry. I wanted to comment about one point that you raised there, Raul, about not being careful not to go over information.
Oh, just froze there. Let's give them a second to catch back up. All right, there you go. We got you back.
Sorry, y'all.
Sorry.
So there was a piece you were talking about there of, now I get the internet is unstable message. There's a piece you were talking about of not wanting to tell the select board things they already know while being sensitive to the fact that the public, a lot of folks are coming in now for the first time. I think there's a piece here as well about pushing the select board a little bit, right? Like they were there and they know how this all turned out, but I'm very sensitive to, and I really worry about, I feel like in a lot of ways we saw across this country in June, a lot of local government, state government, corporations, employers, a bunch of folks suddenly getting spooked and going, oh crap, you know, racism is real and we have to respond to it in some kind of public way because there's a ton of public pressure right now and we personally feel threatened and we're not used to feeling threatened. And I think I'm really worried that a lot of these public processes that have moved us beyond that very urgent and immediate public moment, that a lot of lawmakers are going to feel much more comfortable saying, well, I don't feel threatened by this anymore. I'm no longer scared that there's going to be a public response to whatever I do or say, or that there will be any sort of consequences for me in my political career for voting against this. I think that we could stand to press the select board a little bit and say, hey, this was part of a commitment that you made in June. People are watching you. This was in response to massive public unrest. And frankly, this task force, like I think we could stand to bring up the town meeting where, if I'm remembering my history correctly, part of what happened here is that there was a massive public outcry at the town meeting and everyone went, oh, we're going to push it to the select board. And the select board was all ready to push it completely off the table until, Raul, you successfully got these task forces in place. So I think we could stand to remind them of history a little bit.
That's fair.
With a specific eye towards pushing them to really be accountable.
We'll do that. Makes a lot of sense to me. Anne?
I agree with Alexander, and I just want to add to that. There's a very Brookline thing that always happens, and particularly happens within the town government, that Brookline is different from the rest of the world, that we are special in some way. And I think we need to push back on that a little bit. I also just want to note that so far I've attended, obviously I attended our public hearing 2 weeks ago. I also attended the public hearing of the Police Reform Committee several nights ago. And something we should think about is the amount of positive feedback that our task force received in our public hearing, and the very large amount of negative feedback that was on display the other night in the police reform public hearing. I'm saying that because I think there are a tremendous amount of Brookline residents who are very much in favor of making the changes that we're proposing, and that there possibly may be a disconnect between that large majority of residents who are in favor of the changes we're proposing vis-a-vis the people who actually get to vote on those changes. And I think without getting into this kind of competitive task force versus committee and whose recommendations, I don't want to get into kind of a battle between them. I think that's still important to point out, that the amount of positive responses we've received just so much backup from the community. And what I witnessed the other night at the Police Reform Committee was not that. And I think that matters. That's all.
Thanks, Ann. Any other thoughts? Okay. I think this has been a really helpful conversation. This is, something for us that the framing of our work, and also, this is, March 2nd is our I don't know, not last hurrah, but it's our big hurrah, and our I think our last public opportunity in this way anyway, to make the case for the direction that we're going to be voting on today. And so I'll take these comments to heart and incorporate a lot of what you both just said, Alexandra and Ann, into the introduction for our presentation, for sure. Good. Okay. Second. Got it. Thank you. I'll just read. Let's get back to this. Okay, so the next thing to do, and I want to make sure the floor is still open if anybody's got anything they wanted to share or say, but the next thing for us to do is to adopt this report. So any last thoughts or any other discussion? I'm going to put this motion on the table. Well, let me just move it, and then we'll have just any other discussion that folks want to have. And so let me just go back to our agenda. So this is the question of approving the final report of the task force to reimagine policing in Brookline, and I move that we adopt the final report of the task force to reimagine policing in Brookline. Is there any discussion, anything anyone wants to say before we go ahead and vote? Mike? Oh, I see you're
Second the motion.
Oh, you're gonna second. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Any discussion? Any additional discussion, I should say. All right, let's get to it. I'm gonna go across my screen. First person I see, Bonnie Bastian.
Yes.
Kristen Singleton.
Yes.
Eitan Hirsch.
Yes.
Mike Sandman.
Yes.
Alexander Weinstein.
Yes.
Malcolm Cawthorn.
Yes.
Chi-Chi Wu.
Yes.
Kimberly Richardson.
Yes.
Ann Weaver.
Yes.
Almas Dosa.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, so we have a unanimously approved task force report. We are going to be, I mentioned earlier, we'll just fix the appendix, the Scribner's errors related to the appendices, just relettering them. And we're going to send that then forthwith to the select board for their review in anticipation of our public presentation on Tuesday, March 2nd. Woo. All right. Do you feel like what I don't know if you feel what I feel right now is this sort of the weight of what it took to get us here and the amount of time, I like the amount of time that you all took out of your lives to do this important work, as Alexander so rightfully pointed out, which was, we have to remember the connections to last summer and last spring. The moments that brought us here, around the country, but also right here in Brookline, and the fact that you've all stepped up to do this consistently for so long, not to mention our Friday meetings, but all the other subcommittee meetings and other conversations that you've had and time you've taken out to do this, and the phenomenal staff that's been here with us every step of the way. I just cannot thank you enough for everything that you've done and what you put on the line to get this done. I know we're not there yet, But I just want to say how proud I am of everybody here for all you did. And Bonnie saved me before I get too emotional.
Well, I'm going to push harder on that button because I want to thank you for the opportunity to do this work. This is work I want to do in the world. So this was an opportunity to really actually do it and be able to have a really actual impact and do it for real, for real. So I want to thank you for everything you've done and everything you've been through for this work and all of your emotional labor and everybody, all the emotional labor of particularly all the Black and people of color on this board. I've watched it and I can't save you from it, but it means a lot to go through this work with you all. And I feel like I'm pushing my child out into the world and I want to protect it and I want to usher it forward, and I'm scared, you know, that it's gonna get diced up. So that's just to say that y'all be I'm hoping that we can continue this work because it needs to be continued, and it needs to have this kind of this team or some representation of this team to continue working like this. And so thank you all so much. This has been amazing. And also, I want to publicly say that I voted against that survey, and I stand here before you saying, thank you for that survey. It was not perfect. I did have good criticisms, but thank you for that survey because that that was a good idea. I stand corrected.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Yeah. Malcolm?
In a similar tone, I get criticism from co-workers and others that I'm not easily impressed, and so therefore don't do a lot of praise. But Raul, I really want to thank you for your leadership. You've thanked us a lot. And I can't imagine all that you've had to withstand while getting engaged and expecting a first child and doing all this. And so, yeah, I'm just really thankful for your leadership and proud to call you my select board member. So thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you all. All right. Y'all are great. Okay. Crap. What do we do next, Devin?
Can we have a part? I was gonna say go to Disney World.
You go to Disney? Well, not yet. We still got some work to do. So we're gonna keep this going. Next week we have a meeting. At that point we would have sort of gotten some feedback, or at least like some questions, feedback, things like that from the select board. So I think that's a really important meeting for us to make sure that we keep, so we can digest what we've heard, and be ready to respond, in particular when the public hearing comes around. I am so proud that this is, and I said from the beginning, I think I made it clear maybe in the first meeting that we didn't all have to end up agreeing at the end of this, but I'm glad that we engaged in a process where we were able to get 11 very different people with different experiences in Brookline to reach consensus about unanimous consensus about how we should move forward. I think that's really meaningful, and that shouldn't get lost in our presentation or our conversations about this. The other thing that I think it's important to recognize at this point is that it is our responsibility to defend what we've put out there and to put the best arguments forward about we voted to recommend this, and we should stand behind our recommendations and encourage others to be right there with us. And so I think it's totally appropriate for us to encourage people not just to read this report, but to support its recommendations at this point. And so I encourage you all in your own individual capacities to do that as well. And I think that's it. I may need to reach out just to, or may share some information with the folks that are going to be presenting. Is there anybody that presented at the public hearing? Let me ask that is not available to present on the 2nd. Let me make sure I have that clear.
Do we
Well, let's
have a final start time?
Sorry. I think I'm presenting at the task force meeting on the vulnerable people.
Okay, that's great. That's a change.
Yeah, so yeah, we just chatted, and I think Anne and I are both co-chairs, and she couldn't do it last time, so
That's great. That's terrific. On the question of timing, not yet. Frankly, Devin may know, because I know the agenda is supposed to come out today, and I haven't, for the meeting next week, and I haven't seen it. Devin, do you have any insights yet to share, or is that something we need to wait for the agenda to come out?
Regarding the report being posted by itself?
No, when we're presenting on Tuesday night, like what time?
Oh, the timing. Yeah, I have a pretty good idea of that. Hold on one second. You're really, after budget, which has been taking about an hour. So the meeting will start at 6. We'll probably get to budget presentations around 6:30. So I would say likely a 7:30 start time, which that is going to be for the reforms committee, which I imagine will take about 45 minutes. So around 8-ish, 8:30.
Okay. And I would encourage everybody to be there for the reform committee presentation too, particularly if you weren't able to attend their public hearing this week. So I'd recommend you be there for that.
So Raul, yeah, I presented at the departmental analysis, and I just looked at my calendar, realized the first advisory committee meeting is the same time. So I'm going to need to ask the chair for absolution.
What in fact, I was just going to type a note to Raul, to you, Raul. If you can send Chi-Chi and me a text when we're about to go on, then we'll just step over into the select board meeting. Just a matter of going from one Zoom meeting to another.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
And then I had, thank you, Mike. Thanks, Raul. I had a question about the PowerPoint. I was thinking of attempting to insert some charts in that map into the PowerPoint. Are we using the same PowerPoint?
That's my plan. Devin, do you have any different plan on that?
Nope. I think that the best course of action is for folks who want to make edits to the PowerPoint, just use that same Google slide deck. And I will do a check-in on Tuesday afternoon just to make sure that everyone's in a good place. But the beauty, obviously, of Google Slides is that it's live and living. So whenever I open it for the presentation, it will be in its most final format.
Great.
So
Thank you, Devin.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. Any other questions here? So I'm going to take a run through this weekend. I'll take a run through the presentation. If there are, if there are any ways that I think we can tighten it up somehow or something like that, then maybe we'll do that. Anyway, there may be ways, for instance, I know at the beginning of each subcommittee, we sort of name all the subcommittee members, things like that. There may be ways that we can save 30 seconds or a minute here and there that helps us get down to 45 minutes. So, but I'll take a look at that. Great. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, folks. That's it for today. I'll see you all on Tuesday, March 2nd at the presentation before the select board, and then again next Friday for our meeting, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you, everybody, for all your work, truly. See you soon.